Welcome to the Developmental, a podcast about the messy, beautiful ways grown-ups grow up. Here, we explore turning the science into the day-to-day practice of adult development in teams, homes, organizations, and life. Hello, friends, and welcome to what will be a very special and very personal episode of the Developmental podcast. This is an episode about the transformative power of friendships. And my guest today is who other than my very best friend. Veronica Brejan is a managing partner at the NeuroMindfulness Institute, which is an organization devoted to bridging the science of breathing and mindfulness with the practice of leadership. She is also a former international HR director, having worked as Chief People Officer for Europe at Pizza Hut or coordinated the global talent function at Vodafone. She is a highly experienced coach accredited by the International Coaching Federation and outright one of the wisest leaders that I have ever had the pleasure to know and work with. For the past 12 years, I've been lucky to call Veronica my best friend. We've been through a lot together and separately supporting each other through ups and downs, and we both share a love for vertical development. So relatively recently, in one of our very deep conversations, we have many of those, as you will see in a moment, we had a reflection that our friendship itself and perhaps any long-term, lifelong, conscious friendships such as ours is actually a catalyst for development. So we decided to do something that felt risky and exciting at the same time, which is open up the inner sanctum of our friendship for people to explore and connect to their own experiences of friendship. We will invite you into the 5 seasons of our 12-year relationship with the lessons that we've learned, with some of the challenges that we have navigated together, and also invite you to explore how some of the principles of transformative learning groups, which have emerged from my own research on vertical development, have actually played out in my and Veronica's friendship. By the end of it all, we hope that you will reflect on how vertical development can be hidden in plain sight. It exists in the most important relationships in our lives. And perhaps after this episode, you will go out into your own friendships and seek growth, maybe a bit more consciously than you have before you listen to this. So without further ado, and with a lot of emotion on my part, I'm inviting you into my and Veronica's conversation. We're on with a very, very special guest. This is going to be an atypical session of this podcast because I have with me Veronica Brejan, who is my best friend, has been my best friend for 12 years, my soul sister, my family, as another a friend of ours shared this word with me recently, and I thought it's such a beautiful word. The family we choose, not the family we are given. So this will be a conversation about friendship and about, of course, vertical development. Welcome, Vero.
Thank you, Alice, for such a beautiful introduction and for inviting me to this wonderful discussion. We actually have discussions like this daily, and we said for a few years, maybe one day we record one of them. So thank you for creating the space for the podcast so people like me can come and have conversations with you, and let's see what comes.
Yes, I'm very curious and I'm very nervous. You can also see me on Zoom. I am very nervous because this is not none of the conversations so far have been just intellectual explorations, but this one is very personal. So we've both decided to step into a vulnerable space and kind of open up the black box of a friendship for people to kind of explore and reflect on their own friendships and the way they impact their lives. So we haven't really planned. We have a bit of a structure, but it's going to be pretty loose. Let's see where the conversation takes us. Okay. So maybe let's start with the beginning and kind of go back 12 years to where we started, because you chose me. That's how our friendship started. You chose me.
I searched for you.
You
I searched for you. There were 500 CVs. I searched for you.
On a jobs website, right?
Yeah. That's very romantic. We've met online.
We met online. So do you wanna share a bit of that story? Because I've always found that I found that story such a beautiful story about synchronicity, and also some sort of, I don't know, intuition. I don't know what to call it, but do you wanna give the brief story?
Very happy to remember that moment with you and our friends listening. So I was working in a consulting company in Romania at that time, and we wanted to grow the team with experienced trainers. So we just put an ad online on a platform, and we had 500 CVs. So it was a reputable company, and then everybody wanted to work with us. And then I've screened the 500 profiles, and then I took yours. There was obviously something there, and said, well, there were many other profiles that were really, really good. And I told to my boss, we will see everybody, but this profile, I have a feeling that somehow, even if we choose other people, this lady will work with us. And then we met, and it was a perfect match. And your experience at that time was incredible and exactly what we needed, but also your being was a perfect match with at least with me. I don't know if with the whole team, but that's how we met, and we worked together initially.
Yeah, and on my end, I remember coming to that interview with our former boss and yourself, and liking both of you, but leaving that interview thinking, if this girl is going to be my colleague, I want to work in this place. I really hope they like me, which you did, and we did end up working together. And there was something else that was very, very funny, which only later I think you told me, that on maybe the first or the second week on the job, I created this funny nickname for you that
means nothing.
There is no translation in English, but imagine a word that could be synonym to, I don't know, sweetie pie or something really cute that you don't usually use at work with colleagues. But there was something so endearing about Veronica and just her presence and her warmth that somehow I just felt, I've known this woman for so long, and this nickname just popped out of my mouth, which was probably very unprofessional, seen from the other end. But you did embrace it with a lot of humor. You didn't think I was not taking you seriously.
I did.
As a colleague. So yeah, that was the beginning of what has been a 12-year friendship. And another fun fact is that we did end up quitting that job on the very same day. So we left arm in arm through the parking lot and just headed for the nearby restaurant and had lunch as we went into the new season of our lives after a while, after working together in that first workplace. And the last, where we did work together. We then worked together in many other capacities, but
different roles.
Different roles. Yeah. So with this opening, I just want to zoom out for a moment, because as I said, we do have a bit of a loose structure, because this is not just a personal share about, a friendship, and we're sure you have your own friendships that have changed your lives. Our story is about understanding how a friendship can be transformative. It's an invitation for you to unpack your own friendships and look for the ingredients of growth and transformation, and maybe purposefully put in some more of those ingredients if you need them. So the framework will invite you to reflect on and play with, and we will bring it to life through our own story of friendship, is something that came out of my PhD research, which I shared with Vero, and we had a lot of conversations about it. Something that I discovered looking at a group of leaders going through a transformative leadership program was that one of the most powerful ingredients in that learning program for participants, as they shared when I interviewed them, was their peer learning group. These were really tight-knit groups of people who met on the program, but then became really good friends. And the groups where friendship blossomed turned out to have a really powerful growth impact on the participants. And people, when asked, what was it about this group that was so powerful for you? They identified 5 ingredients, which then we retrofitted and realized that we actually had in our own friendship all along. These 5 ingredients. I haven't actually went ahead and studied friendships and see if this framework applies to them, but let's play with this hypothesis. So the 5 ingredients are diversity. So very different people seem to be able to harness the potential of a relationship in a more powerful way. You need that diversity. You need those different views of life to be able to challenge each other in interesting ways. So diversity is the first ingredient, but then you need similarity. You need to look for the bridges. You need to look for the common ground. So these 5 ingredients actually come in 2 pairs and then a 5th one that holds all of them together. So diversity and similarity are the first 2, the first pair. Then the second pair that goes on the back of the first 2 is challenge and support. It turns out that these transformative groups had the capacity to both support each other unconditionally without judgment, but also challenge each other with a lot of honesty and candor. So people would be very frank about mirroring each other, making each other even uncomfortable, but in a constructive way. So challenge and support. And then the 5th one was consistency. So you need to do it over and over and over again for years and years, sometimes 12 in our case, and counting. So what do you think of these 5 ingredients, Vero? What were your thoughts when I shared my discovery with you? I don't think you were that surprised.
No, and it's at the end, it's about human nature and relationships, right? At work, in friendship. And I remember one of the intentions we had when we said, why are we doing this episode? We said, well, sometimes vertical development, we're doing NeuroMindfulness. These words might sound fancy for people. And not all of us have the time, the money, the resources in general, all the time to go through fancy retreats or experiences. And we realized how much we learn from each other, from friendship, which is available all the time. And when you brought the framework, I found amazing, that actually this puts the structure on something that we've been experiencing for 12 years. So didn't put a lot of thinking. So let's see what comes up. I just thought of major moments in our friendship, and I was like, wow, that's amazing, because that's when we were similar. And this happened. So yeah, very happy to explore together in different seasons how all these 5 elements played into the friendship. And maybe coming back to what you said about vulnerability, everything has the light and the shadow. So our friendship as well. So we will share both with the purpose of learning and with the purpose of just making it real. And hopefully at one point you can do some research maybe on friendship, because that could be interesting to see.
Yeah, and I do remember when you said it to me the first time, actually that's such an interesting reflection, that friendship, something that we cherish, but also maybe to a certain extent we take for granted in our lives, is actually such an amazing laboratory for growth and transformation. And do we consciously harness our friendships? And I do know that, and we'll get to that point in our story. I almost lost our friendship at a certain point in time, when I didn't know how to connect anymore. And I wondered, had I been aware of how precious it is, would it have helped me to reconnect sooner in a difficult moment that we went through? So it's almost just a reminder of how powerful these, special relationships in our lives are, and how growth can be found just in life. As you say, you don't absolutely have to necessarily, take away 3 months of your life to go through a deep experience. You might have the deep experience right there at the end of a phone call with your best friends. You just need to recognize it. So we might take people through some highlights from the 5 seasons, as we said, the 5 seasons of our friendship. There were 5 chapters.
You know that movie with the young and the restless that was like, I don't know, for 15 years?
Yeah, that never ends. This episode will end. So 5 seasons and 5 transformative ingredients. So what would you say if, the first of the 5 ingredients is the differences, the diversity? How did that play out? We are similar, but we are also very different people. What's your first thought? How did diversity play out for you?
Well, I think initially what attracted me to your profile, because I knew certain things right from the CV, was the very different experience. I had a corporate experience, so like in a framework with certain departments, all the things that come with a corporate role. And you had a very free approach to life and to your career, which I found fascinating. So that was, in a way, the big difference between the two of us in the way we would approach career work, but also in the way we would live our life. I was more of a compliant, the good girl, the following through I always had, the color code, and dressed in you would always break boundaries and be a little bit more rebel and more free.
I would get told off by HR for not abiding by the dress code of the company that we used to work for.
Yes, I think that was the first big difference. How about you? What came to your mind?
I remember what struck me as different, in a way that inspired me, was I was very agitated, maybe is the word. Restless may be the better word. And you seem to not rush into things. You seemed, and you still are, very thoughtful in the way you react. I remember different, contexts of work, a client that would do something that I would find unfair, or a colleague that would do something that I wouldn't like. And I would be reactive, not necessarily outwardly reactive, but there would be a lot of emotion. And you would always urge me to slow down, to reflect. What do you think this other person is thinking? What do you think is going on for them? Which I found at times a bit annoying, because I couldn't, let my frustrations out. But at the same time, I admired that wisdom and that capacity you had. And hopefully it did rub on me a little bit. I did learn a bit how to create that pause between stimulus and response, which I think you were really, and still are, really, really good at. And there's a huge wisdom to that I've learned so much from. So we did have different personalities too, and different ways of engaging with life and with people. And there was that crossover of energies there. But then we also had a lot of similarities, which I think we discovered quite early as well in our friendship, which then helped create that bond of trust that has brought us and kept us together. What was for you? Do you remember what was for you the similarity or the common ground that you found that resonated?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I remember was the need for, I would say, meaning now. I don't think at that time it was so profound, but we were not into just, creating PowerPoints or we're not just happy coming to work, doing our stuff, going back home and living our life. Our life was there as well. So we're very similar in that sense of, we have the time here, let's make the most out of it, let's bring value, let's help people grow. And we both had the client for us was the person in front of us. I think it was very clear from the beginning that the group in the training room, the group we were working with, was for us the main client we would want to serve, and at the best we could. So, and that was from the beginning something that I think helped us also deal with differences in an easier way, because we would come back to this common purpose. Okay, we're here to do this, and then we would focus on that rather than the small annoying differences that came from time to time.
I was going to say, I was curious, actually, this is the first time I've actually asked you this question. What was the bridge for you? Because for me, it was exactly the same thing. I remember thinking, this is a person who is purpose driven. And that for me matters more than anything else. And particularly in quite a competitive corporate context where results and KPIs and money mattered a lot, and people valued that, and status and promotions and bonuses and all of that, corporate game that has its own rules. I felt like when we worked together, it was always about what's the most positive impact we create for the human beings that get to work with us. And there was something really sacred about that. And I also think part of that was a commitment for integrity that you had and I shared, about, putting the impact and putting the positive intent ahead of any other kind of, incentive we might have had to take the easy way, or, cut corners, rush a project, do whatever it might have been. There was always, we're not going to do it the easy way. We're going to do it the right way. And I think that actually stuck with us, because after we left that workplace, the second season of our friendship, you went ahead and continued your corporate career. And I went ahead and started my own consultancy, my own leadership development consultancy, and I became my own boss, for better or worse. My rebellious nature just needed that total freedom. But we did end up, actually, the universe brought us together to work as client and supplier in another corporate context. But that same intention, those same values of impact and integrity and wanting to do good held in that new, just the new roles that we took in that second season. I see you nodding.
I thought of how we transitioned to the second season and how natural and smooth it was, and there were some ethical questions that we addressed there, because we were friends and you ended up working with the company, so we had to separate that. And for a while, I remember we didn't even see each other quite a lot. You were working with different teams, and there was a clear cut there, because that's how that's how it was fair. But before moving to season 2, I realized that there was something that actually brought us together, something that comes from a much more vulnerable place. We were both divorcing. I divorced, and you were in the middle of it. And that, in a way, for me, it put things into perspective. Like my time, my peace, my life. I was actually looking for something meaningful. I was not in the mood to rush things, or I was like, okay, what life brings me, and how can I contribute to something if that the other something didn't work out? And I remember it was really painful for me to come to work every day for a few months. And in a way, at one point, we had conversations at lunch about that, and we found support, and with tears and fun and sarcasm and all the elements that can help us cope with that moment. But in terms of similarities, that was a very powerful moment in our friendship, I think.
Oh yes, absolutely. It's interesting how my mind went to the fun stuff, not to the raw stuff as a first thought, but that actually preceded the fun stuff, because we were both heartbroken
Yes.
And even being able to share the heartbreak with somebody else who's going through the same thing. Although the timing was a bit, you went through your heartbreak a bit before I did through mine, but it was close enough to really feel for and with each other. And I believe for me, it was the first time I was able to confide in someone who really understood what I was going through. And speaking of that, actually, that kind of leads me to highlighting the other two ingredients in our little transformative frame, because the challenge and the support come in at this point. So the heartbreak and the divorce we were both going through was part of the similarity piece, but how we actually spoke about it and how we supported each other, that was what you choose to do with your similarities and your differences. And I remember feeling unconditionally supported and never judged as I was going through those messy months of therapy and figuring out what I'm doing with my life. So that unconditional positive regard, that unconditional support, was life-changing for me.
Yeah, and just to put things in perspective, I was 30 and you were 26, so we were very young.
I was, so if it's 12 years, which it is 38, I was 28.
Okay,
28.
so and then 20,
and you're 32. Yeah.
32.
Yeah, we were ahead of our time in the heartbreak department. always better start
tick the
early.
box.
That's what I say. Get it done with. Yeah. So that was the support part. What was the challenge part? What was the first time you remember challenging each other, or challenging me, or me challenging you?
I think I challenged you a lot on small things, like, I don't know, I remember you put a big dog and a small dog on you were doing all these like rebel things, and then we were like a serious company, and
On a slide,
you
I put the dogs on a slide.
You put two dogs like, fighting and saying shit or something on a slide. I was like, you cannot put that, and just get over it. We need to, just put the bloody color. Don't come in jeans at work, and just do it, So I was more like in these kind of small things, and didn't really understand why it was so important for you to bring these little rebel elements. So I think the challenge from me to you came like this, and also what I would perceive as something that was not a little bit childish, I would say. But I don't even know why it bothered me so much at that time. Now looking back, I would be like, yeah, whatever, just put whatever you want on you, or just put whatever slide, right? It just doesn't matter. But at that time, it was a bit annoying, I would say. I wouldn't say a challenge. It was not. The challenge for me came from my own life, because at 30 I divorced, and it's not how I imagined my life. And taking the job that I had was, in a way, in full crisis. I didn't have other choice. It was a very good job, but it was not a choice. It was the only choice. So, when you at 30, you feel like your life is rather closing instead of opening up and living this beautiful, what people imagine, that you have maybe a child or a fulfilling couple relationship and the house and everything. So I had literally nothing. I rented a studio in the forest next to the office. So the challenge for me at that time came from my own life, and I think a little bit for you as well. I'm curious if there was a big challenge in the relationship for you.
With you, I don't even remember you scolding me for my non-compliant behaviors. If you did, I didn't feel scolded because I do remember at that time I had very strong opinions about people, telling me what to do or not to do, but it didn't feel like it. I did feel like you were calling me out on having healthy boundaries around, what is justified push back when you need to push back on things, and what is just pure immature rebelliousness. So there was something to learn from that. And I also think that the fact, which is why I find these 5 ingredients I was talking about so fascinating, that if you have the challenge and the support in the right dosage, you reap the benefits of both without feeling the downsides. Because support without challenge is boredom or complacency, or there's just not enough impetus for you to grow. But then the challenge without support is judgment and hurt. And I never felt that. So I knew that whatever you were telling me with love. So that mattered a lot. And in the background, I was fighting my own demons. Because when we met, my own marriage was coming to an end, and by the time we moved into season 2 of our lives, I was officially also divorcing and getting into a new stage for myself as well. So I navigated a lot of personal turmoil, and both of us actually navigated a lot of personal turmoil while also being really good at what we did. And working as a team and creating results for the company, for the client. So there was this there were 2 lives we were living, and the fact that we could share what was going on in the background for both of us, which kind of leads me to think of that piece of research. And I will look it up actually and put it in the resources because I can't remember the source now, but there is definitely a piece of research around having friends at work is a huge source of motivation and well-being for employees. Are you able to find at least one person at work that you can consider a true friend with whom you can have these types of conversations? Look what's happening. I was hoping I would have kids by 30 and my life is going into a completely different direction. And I was hoping I would have a bright future, and actually things are crumbling around me. To be able to have those conversations in the context of work with people you trust can be hugely beneficial in so many ways. So I think we were very lucky in that way.
We were, and stay with us because the challenge will come. So it's not this an easy season for the friendship, right?
This is just the initial season.
The trailer.
Because then the similarities and the differences, and as we grew, we kind of popped into new challenges with each other and in our own lives. And there's actually something that comes to mind now when you say it. I haven't really thought about it, but it's just important maybe to acknowledge in a long-term friendship like ours that people actually grow and they change and they're not the same people anymore. And to be able to be with them, embrace the new version of them, the new season, recognize when the new season comes.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you brought this because when I reflected on today's discussion, I had this in mind, that it's sometimes challenging when one person is changing, then the dynamic is changing, right? And it's for the other person who is maybe in a different process, might be uncomfortable for a while. And it's not only, in friendship, it's in any relationship. That's why I'm not a big fan, as you know, of personality profile type of you are like this or you are not like this, or because it's a constant change. And the beauty of growth is observing that change and putting it on the table, even in moments when it's not comfortable. And I think we did that a lot of times, not all the time, but over the last years, we're getting better and better at putting the challenges in the spotlight.
Yeah. When was the first time for you when you kind of realized, I'm getting into a new season of my life and Alice is getting into a new season of her own and something is shifting and we're redefining how we go about our friendship? Because we went from working together. So the consistency piece in the equation was just a given. We would see each other all the time, to going our separate ways. And in very different environments. You were working in an HR position in a large corporation. I was in touch with that environment, but by being a facilitator and coming in from a very different role. But we would not see each other as much, and we would not be in touch as much as we were before. So we suddenly had to work to keep the friendship alive.
Yeah, I think at that time the challenges and the differences, the diversity these two elements were amplified for me, because I woke up from the post-divorce moment and I went into achiever mode, but like full speed. And I love my job. I've dreamt of being in companies like this and leading these beautiful projects and working with those wonderful people. And so for me, it was like, okay, I've dreamt all my life to be here. Now it's my moment. I wanted to also grow ego-wise, better title, better car, more money, buy a house, and all the things that come with the achiever mode on. Mm-hmm. And you were very laid back, according to my standard, right? And my fuel for and my adrenaline, it was a different energy. So you were more into trusting life and working with a different rhythm, working on a lot of projects you loved, and in a way having the freedom to choose. There were lots of fears, and I know we discussed, but from my perception at that time, there was much more, in a way, much easier life, what I perceived. And for me, there was lots of struggle. Although I said to myself, I enjoy the journey, it brought me to the burnout eventually. So it was not a healthy rhythm or a healthy way of being a leader. So yeah, I think I was, again, in the achiever mode. I was cognitive performance was my main focus, not the heart, not the compassion, not to be kind to people. I was a good person, so I never harmed anyone consciously, but I did because I was in that rhythm. So my team had to follow, and so on. So there was a big discrepancy in the way we would live our day-to-day life. And I think we went over the season. We moved to season 3 because you were very patient in season 2. You would try 10 times to me, how about we go for a salad tonight? How about, look, I'm going to come next to your office. So you actually made my life very easy when, you were very much available to meet when I wanted, when I could, where it was easy for me. And I'm very grateful you did that, because at that time I didn't have mental energy for anything else than work.
Yeah, which kind of and that actually that energy exchange reversed later on, which is very interesting in itself. It's almost like a friendship calls for one person to invest a bit more in certain seasons, and to do it wholeheartedly. And I didn't think at that time that I was investing. I was happy for you, for seeing how you grew your career, and actually just listening to you now describe, your mindset at that time. From where I was sitting, I didn't see, I did see the achiever drive, but I didn't see any ruthless energy to it. It was your ambition to create something of and for yourself, but you also had kept, in my eyes, and I know from knowing the people who worked with you at the time, the caring, the putting people first mindset was still there. So for me, you are still Vero, my friend, who I love, and you're just busy. You're working 16-hour days, and I'm just gonna, nag you until you find an evening for us to go out and have a salad and a glass of wine together. And there was also something where our focus was, as you said, because I was during those years, I went through my therapy process and building my business. So there was a lot of insecurity for me in not knowing what's going to happen, but trusting the process. But I was experimenting with a lot of things like holotropic breath work and reading all sorts of more spiritually focused things, and you were very, very pragmatic. And
I didn't have time for hippie stuff, right?
I didn't have time for hippie stuff. But there was always, I didn't feel frustrated by it, or maybe momentarily there might have been moments of, oh, Vero, why can't you stop and just read this book and take up a bit of meditation practice would do you good. Yeah, but that non-judgment thing that we had from the beginning, I feel like we managed to keep through that season. I definitely managed to keep. Yeah, which then paid off because it led us into season 3 when I needed your compassion. Season 3 was an interesting one.
Season 3 is the peak of right? We became mothers, both of us. You
Yes.
first, so I had a bit of a heads up from you of what that could be. But yeah, maybe we can acknowledge
9 months apart.
Yeah,
we became mothers.
Yes,
9 months
Edna
apart.
called Danielle, and she said, "Hey, come here. I need a buddy."
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a powerful moment for both of us. And for those of you who are parents, you know what we're talking about, and for the others, you will probably, if you choose to be a parent, know. It comes with lots of magic, and many people talk about the magic, but it comes also with a lot of challenges. And we had our share of that. So
Yep.
our friendship changed during that season when the kids were very little.
Yeah. And that was one of those moments for me when and I only understood it looking back. When you talk about a friendship being transformative, it sounds so beautiful and so aspirational and inspirational, but part of the transformative can be that you're being faced with mirrors of yourself that you don't want to see, or the people you love, like your closest friends, they reflect something back at you that is very, very hard to process. And in our case, what happened from my end was that as I became a mother, I went into a healing, a lot of pain that I had held on from my own childhood, from my own relationship with my own mother. And there was this drive to almost be and do what she couldn't be or couldn't do when I was very little. So my parenting style was very involved, always there, always present. We didn't really have grandparents close, so we were always with our child. And then your context was different because you had the grandparents who were amazing and they could step in. So you seemed more relaxed. You would allow yourself to go away for a couple of days. And just take a breath and come back to your baby who is super happy spending a bit of time with the grandparents. And I noticed in myself for the first time in our friendship, and by that time we would have been friends for a good 6 years or so, judgment. There was something that I found so triggering or annoying about the parenting choices that Vero made. It feels so vulnerable and uncomfortable to even think about it now, and it's almost again a good 6 years later. But I think I pulled back. That's when I pulled back. I realized, I was conscious enough to realize that my judgment had little to do with you and more to do with me, but I wasn't clear enough in my mind to know exactly what it was to put my finger on it. So I didn't know what else to do but to disconnect during that time, which looked like me always being busy this time, roles reversed, and you always reaching out and going, do you have a bit of time? Do you want to chat? How was that for you? How was that? Lasted about a year or two, I think.
I think it was very close to 2.5.
Yeah.
It was a bit longer. but you were extremely busy, so the time probably just kind of perception of time is changing, because you had workshops back to back. I remember you were so successful and everybody wanted to work with you, and then you would use the evenings and the weekends, of course, to be with the family and to be with the little ones. So it was a very intense time for you. For me, it was the other way around. That's where I actually left my corporate role. I started a company with my life partner. We took a few months for ourselves to create content. We went to the ashram a few times and to retreats. I became a yoga teacher. Went to Vipassana retreat, so I discovered the whole, spiritual world through different lenses, and I was on a very different rhythm, more of creating space and time to be and time to connect with myself. So I think for a while I was patient, and then at one point I realized that when you will be in Australia, we will not be able to have a face-to-face conversation. So the love was there, the friendship was there, but we didn't have, if we go back to the 5 pillars that you mentioned, we didn't have consistency. And that was an important point, because if you don't stay connected, then it's very difficult to keep a friendship at that level of depth that we used to have. So I remember that we had a conversation before you moved to Australia, if we transition to season 4. Mm-hmm. And that was a very powerful moment for both of us and for our friendship, to acknowledge that, we'll be on the other side of the world from each other. So if we, it's a choice. Do we stay friends, or do we call each other just for the Christmas and the birthday and, just keep that superficial connection? And I think we chose to stay friends.
Yeah, we did. And I remember vividly that conversation, because, again, going back to the 5 ingredients, what I also think we lacked was the challenge, because I was not able to articulate what was wrong for me, what, the emotions that I had regarding motherhood and, my version of motherhood and your version of motherhood, which actually, when we reconnected, we realized how many similarities. And now that our kids are much older, we realize how many things we did exactly the same. But I was not able to articulate it. So I didn't really challenge. I didn't really open up the conversation. And also, I think I was afraid to open it up. And then you did. And I remember you doing it with so much honesty, but at the same time, love and compassion. I really, really felt you called me out on my behavior without putting me down. And that for me was both a wake-up call and a life lesson. Because it was about, what do you do when things are hard? Do you just hide and pretend nothing's wrong? And I almost had managed to convince myself, I am busy. I'm still, I was continuing to build my business and being a mom full time, and kind of trying to do both, which didn't really leave time for anything else. But I continued to do all of that after we moved to Australia, and we still find time almost every day to have a chat, even for 5 minutes. So time was clearly not the issue. My presence, my capacity to connect was the issue. So it was I can't really remember so many moments in my life when someone was able to make me uncomfortable with so much love as you did then.
I think that was also the moment when I found my strength, because I was a new parent, right? So I knew nothing about parenting. Like literally, you read some stuff, I didn't. So I just knew a little bit about it. But then it took me a while to kind of embrace my role and trust my choices as a parent, and then come to you and say, hey, I acknowledge there is something there, but this is my choice. So I'm not going to justify it or, and it was, you also were open enough to say, fine, you know, I trust you as a friend that you do what's good for your child. So there was a door opening. I don't know if you opened or I opened, but it opened and allowed us to move to season 4.
Season 4. I just had a thought just now before we go to season 4. There's something that Brené Brown says around trust and boundaries, that there can be no trust without boundaries. So I think that was a moment where you set your boundaries around what was important to you. And I got to kind of turn the mirror back and go, okay, what is going on for me? Is this, you know, about Vero and her choices, or is it about me and my unsolved issues with my own mom? And actually, after that conversation, I went and had some conversations with my own mom and cleared the air. So I think you set in motion a bit of domino effect around setting boundaries and speaking your truth with love, which kind of rebalanced and, as you said, reopened that door and brought us back together. Although paradoxically, it brought us back together when you were living in France and I moved to the other end of the world, in Australia, and started life over. What to say about season 4? I think I will start by just saying that I think what we did in season 4 was bring back consistency, because we did stay true to that commitment to reconnect. And you're calling, I'm calling, quite often you're calling more often than I am, but we end up talking every couple of days. We do connect, sometimes just for silly things, share a joke, nothing deep. Not all of our conversations are deep. Some of them are quite ridiculous.
Come on, Alice, don't give that away. Of course, yeah.
But that connection matters. So what was important? What did you learn in season 4?
Well, I learned lots of things in season 4 because, well, first of all, I admire you for your courage and for, you know, starting all over in a totally new continent and working, being a mom and doing your PhD in the same time. I just, you know, a part of me admire you and looked at you like a superhero, and you're my superhero from that point of view. But I also had my worries that this wouldn't last, right? You would become tired after maybe a year or 2 or 3. And I knew that from my own corporate experience, that no matter how much you love what you're doing, there's a limit of the body. So it started this way. And then on my own journey, the business, you know, we were in the 3rd year of freelancing and the business was going really well. But the pandemic was very harsh on our family. So we lost 2 family members on my husband's side, his father and his grandma. And it was very hard. We lived with them in the same house. So I remember we spoke every day, but in some days I was so happy to hear you, but you were in a very good place. The schools didn't close in Australia. So it was a very different environment. So I was happy for you, but in the same time, really difficult to cope with my own family context, family karma, how I said it during those 2 years. So there was support for sure. Like if we go back to the 5 elements, there was support, but I had a lot of challenge that was not coming from you, but from the way we had to live our life.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because it's if I'm thinking of 2020 but the year before as well for us, because that was the first year where we found ourselves in a new country, starting life over. I as you know, I found 2019 more difficult than 2020 for the reasons you stated. We were quite sheltered in Queensland, where I live, because my friends in Melbourne and Sydney have not been so lucky. They've had Melbourne has had, as people probably know, one of the longest lockdowns in the world. So they've suffered, but we were very sheltered where we were. But the year before that was the year of building a life in a whole new place, and it was extremely hard for us that year. And I believe now, listening to you, that what we did throughout those 2 years was kind of trying to protect each other a little bit from the hard that the other one was going through, because the year before the pandemic, I almost felt you were in a good place. You had started your own business. You were, moving into a new place. You're buying your own house. So there was this beautiful moment for you as a family, and I was going through the trenches. And then the year after, you went through so much pain and so much heartache and heartbreak with the family, and I went into a better place. So I'm almost thinking, if we were to go back, what I would probably do is listen more, hold space better, share more maybe of, what I was experiencing or what I was going through, because it almost felt like, oh, you're having it so easy, and I'm going through this rough time. When,
yeah, I think we spoke a few weeks ago. We spoke a few weeks ago about that, and the lesson we took both from it, because it happened like in the span of 2 years. It happened 1 year for you, 1 year for me, and it's hard when someone dear to your heart comes and say, "Well, I'm so happy, everything is fine," and you don't really feel like dumping all your, depression or anxiety or like hardcore stuff on them, because they're well, and you don't want to maybe share, but in a softer way than you would do if you would feel like there's a space there, and not necessarily a joyful space. So when we were both well, it was good and easy. When we were both not well, it was easy, because we would know how to support each other. But when one is really well and the other one is really down, I think that's where in our friendship, we just didn't know. We didn't have a compass. We are now building the compass for that kind of context.
Yeah. What is for you that compass? Because I think I absolutely agree. I think that for me is probably one of the biggest lessons of the last few years in terms of keeping a friendship alive and evolving it and growing from it. This idea, when one is up and the other one is down, how can you still be happy for the joys of this other person that you care about, but also be honest about your own hardship? And when you're in a good place, enjoy the good place that you're in, but also hold space in earnest for the pain of your friend. Be able to do both. There's a paradox there. There's a polarity, that tension there, which I think we were a bit clumsy in figuring it out, how to navigate it. But what did you take as that compass you were talking about?
I think it's holding space, as you said, but it's also being very straightforward. I mean, coming back to the challenge, but challenge, we have enough trust, we have enough love, we have enough experience and, history in our friendship that we can just say to each other, just shut up. I don't want to hear about your beautiful things today. I'm really, really in pain. I need you to listen to me. And it's not easy. But you did it a few times, and you were very very good at that, and it's really brave to be able to do that and say with a loving heart, but saying, hey, I need you today. It's not easy to hear, it's not easy for me to be happy for you today, and that's okay. It's probably something in that area that we need to practice and find our own way of saying it, because I remember when you said it a few months ago, I was surprised because what I would see on, our conversations, which were very much work related about programs, it was very different than what was happening in your heart, and all the questions you had, and all the conflicting emotions that were taking place there. And if you didn't tell me about that, I would never know. Yep. Right? You were telling me a lot about the program you built, the Vertical Development Institute, and how you had this beautiful vision of creating that. So our conversations were 90% about that. And then there was the other part of your heart that was going through a transition, which was not easy to handle. But I had a hunch, obviously, but no idea that it was with that intensity until you actually said it to me.
Yep. Yeah, there is something really powerful in being able to be candid about all of what you're feeling. Because the good things that I was sharing were 100% true, but the hard things that I was feeling, maybe I was holding back because it felt like, why pollute this great conversation with, the fact that I'm down at the moment. And maybe friendships are, or profound friendships that are forged in the fires of time, like ours is, and so many others are, trust that there is enough strength in that container to hold everything. You don't have to make your friend feel comfortable through sharing just the good stuff. Protect them from the hard stuff, just because they're in a good place, and maybe they're not in the mood for holding space for the hard stuff. And as you said, it's funny in a sense how when we're both having a hard time, it's just so much easier to share the rawness of how hard it is, because you almost have permission. You're in a dark place at the moment. You can understand. There's that similarity there. But when you're in a really good place, I don't want to upset you with my dark moods, so I'll just hold them back. But then when you hold it back, there's something that is left unsaid. There's something that is not, the energy is not flowing properly. So I think we're learning to navigate, and I wonder how people, will resonate with this, how things play out in their own friendships. Do they notice this seesaw nature of, are you able to be happy for your friend when they're really happy, and you might not be in as a good place in your own life in that moment? Still rejoice for them, but still be able to have those frank, candid, raw conversations.
Alice, while you were talking, I realized we didn't talk about something that's, I wouldn't know where to put it on the framework, but we are pretty good at bringing humor, especially in tough moments. I think we have this thing that we released a lot, not our way of releasing tension and talking about life and just, let it flow in tough moments is a lot of humor. From, when the kids were small, and there are like those weird moments that you have to deal with when you don't know what to do, or to moments when we're in a different country. We both live in different countries, different cultures than the origin culture. And there've been lots of moments, when we called each other and we were able, like, very quickly to turn the conversation into making fun of the challenges. And probably on the challenge part, I think we're very good at that.
Yeah, maybe humor and laughing, being able to laugh at yourself with a person you trust and laugh at the ridiculousness of life sometimes is just so cathartic. Which this conversation has not necessarily demonstrated the humor part, because it's been so easy to get into the deep. But yeah, you're right. I can't even think of an example. It's funny how I can't remember necessarily. I know we do a lot of that, but they're not as memorable. They're like moments of energy release when you say something silly and we laugh and it kind of a bubble bursts. And then oftentimes we're able to talk about really deep, important stuff. But sometimes the deep is just too much, and you have to acknowledge it. I don't have the mental space for this right now. And being silly is sometimes exactly what you need.
Shall I move to season 5? And
Season 5.
Last?
Yep.
Season 5 is now.
Season 5 is now. We don't really know what season 5 is yet. We don't know what it holds. I feel it has come for me, and I'd love to hear what it brought you. A new level of even us having this conversation, recording it and knowing we're going to, make it public and people can listen to it. It's probably not something we would have done a few years ago. There's a level of transparency and of vulnerability and of just calling things out and trying to figure out what it means and what you can learn from it, that I feel I'm so much more open to in season 5. What is season 5 for you?
For me, season 5 started a few months ago, so it's pretty new. But the intention from season 5 is to learn from life. And I've done it a little bit in the last few years, but not to this extent. So, of course, I met people who are doing this naturally. Of course, I attract the courses, the life experiences that would bring me on this path. But it's very much about observing how life can provide anything I need, and everything is available. And living with this mindset of serving, sharing, and setting intentions in that direction, and accessing the resources and the support that I need. I think you've been pretty good at that, trusting life and trusting that things will come your way in different seasons. For me, it's a big shift of trusting life, but fully, not yes, I trust life, but I have plan B, plan C, plan D, like consultant style.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to experience in this season life flowing and allowing myself to be myself and to be in the now, in any relationship, in any context I encounter. And of course, all that from the angle of everything in the outside world is a reflection of myself. So if things are not working, what I can solve within myself. So these are the glimpses for me of the season 5, and I'm learning so much from you. I've learned, especially on season 2, when you opened the spiritual world for me, and I was definitely not available for that. And over the last 7 years, I've experienced so many things that brought me to the point of acknowledging how vast the universe is, and how beautiful it is when I allow myself to connect with different people, different stories, and grow from that experience.
So when you say trusting life and learning from it, does that also mean embracing the unpleasantness in a new way, embracing the hard in a different way, or?
In the same way. And I think I've experienced few life events in the last few months that were not pleasant, especially in the parenthood with our son, who has been through a challenging transition with school, and we had to take decisions. There was a context where things were actually tough for a 6 years old, and I observed myself that it was challenging, but in the same time, I was able to keep the meta awareness of, what this brings to us as a family, what this brings to me as a mother, what is the decision I need to take, what is his karma, what is his lesson from it, and not feel myself guilty that I didn't make a better choice. So a lot of learning. Of course, there are those uncomfortable emotions that you're talking about in your research. I don't think anybody can turn that off. But I've learned to look at that with a bit more curiosity, not only pain.
Yeah. I love that. And I think, yeah, that is something that really resonates with my own version of season 5. The cultivating the capacity to stay curious instead of shut down. Which is, and also, for me, there's a coming to terms with the fact that I will never be done with the growing, done with the learning. I mean, I've always intellectually said that and believed that. But there's, and I believe particularly in our profession where we support others learning all the time, and we hear people's stories in coaching, and sometimes people project onto you, their aspirations, and you seem to be a bit further ahead in your own growth or learning. And I no longer believe that's true. I think we're all very humbly on a path of imperfection. And I find with a lot of joy and relief that I'm feeling more at peace with that, with my limitations, with the moments of incongruence where I'm not walking my talk. I'm not always the calm and wise mother I wish I could be. I haven't always been the best friend I could have been. There's something really freeing in accepting that and waking up the next day and trying to do better. So every day is a new beginning and a new opportunity to do better is a bit of my motto for season 5. We've been, I don't even know how this will sound to people listening to it, how much of a flow, of a start and an ending it has, this conversation. Maybe it shouldn't. It should be just like life, open-ended. So I'd love to maybe bring us to an end with a bit of a question for us both. What have we learned? What have we learned from each other that we can take into season 5?
You want to start? Or do you want me to start?
I can start. What I have learned from you is never give up hope. You are probably the most hopeful, luminous person that I have ever met. I feel you've got this uncanny ability to find the light in the darkest dark and go, nope, it is dark, it's pitch dark, but there's a tiny slither of light over there. It's very far. You might not even see it, but just walk towards it. So yes, hope and that wisdom to trust that the light is there and you can find it, and that the dark is okay too. Because that's also part of your wisdom. That's something very precious that I've learned and I continue to learn from you.
Thank you for sharing. For me, there are two. I mean, there are so many things, but there are two that came to my mind very clear. The first one is very practical. I learned boundaries from you. For you, we talked at one point, and you were like, "Well, what is this?" You're not even talking about the topic because it's come so natural to you. So I've been very empathetic, and over time, I went into empathetic distress quite a lot because I wouldn't know how to set boundaries of what is my life, what is my personal time, what's my well-being. So I learned a lot from you on that one. And on a more soul connection, I learned to accept my shadow. I think this has been a topic of, well, I tend to ignore it. I was like, fine, I know it's a shadow, but I've never been curious about it. I've been like, if something comes up, I look at it, but for a short time and without curiosity, more of like, okay, there's some cleaning to be done, let me clean, but with a lot of judgment and get rid of it, rather than, well, let's nourish this little demon and see what he or she wants and how we can help, and maybe make peace with that. So in the same way that you shared, for me there was a lot about accepting that light can exist only if darkness can exist. They can be only together, and become a little bit more curious about my own shadow. And I'm on a journey to befriend my anger, to befriend my sadness, and especially anger, because that's something I didn't know how to process for many years.
I'm I'm smiling because I'm learning to tame tame my anger. I befriended it long ago, so but it became a bit too good of a friend. So now I need to go the other way. I'm so deeply grateful to you and for you. And I know you know it. We do say that to each other. I love you and I'm grateful for you. And I really do. I love you and I'm so grateful for you. And I'm grateful you chose to do this with me. It really feels very vulnerable, and it's a little piece of our heart that we're laying out here together. And hopefully it can, inspire people to think about the Veronica of their life, whoever that might be for them. Give them a call if they haven't in a while. Check in, see what those shadows are that might be unsaid. What are those 5 ingredients? How are they playing out in their friendships? So I'll be very curious what questions and reflections this brings up for people.
Thank you, Alice. I'd like to maybe start with our favorite quote from the last year.
Finish with that. That is yes, the wisest thing that I have heard in a very long time. It was a game changer when you first shared it with me.
Yeah, it was a game changer for me. So when I did my yoga teacher training in the Shivananda lineage, which is an Indian tradition, Swami shared with us something that's very different in the Western world than in the Eastern world. And she said that we think that relationships are there to make us happy, and that relationships are not there to make us happy, but to make us grow through the limitation of the other. So it being couple or friendship, whatever is the shadow of the other person is an opportunity to activate maybe some light in you, and what's your shadow will maybe reflect something in the other person. So yeah, we are in this journey together, and the friendship can be a wonderful opportunity of growth if we learn how to turn it into that.
Can you say that again? Can you say that whole phrase again? Because that's such a powerful phrase.
So relationships are not made to make us happy. They are made to make us grow through the limitation of the other. That's very important, the last part.
Through the limitations of the other. So the fact that I have so many limitations is such a gift. Because
yes, I can grow.
Going to help you grow.
You see, you're doing a great job, right? And I'm doing a great job with you. We're helping each other. It's well, we joke about it in the podcast now when we talk about friendship, but actually when we remind ourselves, it's quite often in the couple when we talk about couple dynamics. So it's really powerful when you look at your friendship or your couple relationship from that angle. Of what can how can
next
I
time
grow?
You're pissed off by the limitations of the other, remember, they are there to help you grow. Thank you so much, my wonderful friend. It's been a joy to have this conversation with you, and to many more to come.
To many more to come.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you did find anchors in my and Veronica's conversation that remind you of your own friendships, of your own journey with people who have come to your life to support your growth, whether you knew it or not when you actually met them. This last thought that Vero shared with me still remains one of the wisest things that I have ever heard. So I'll repeat it one last time for you to take away from listening to this episode. Relationships are not meant to make us happy. They are meant to make us grow through the limitations of the other. What are your limitations that you might be working hard to transcend? And they might be growth opportunities for the people around you. And most importantly, what are the limitations that drive you mad in the people you love that are actually amazing gifts for growth in yourself? I'm looking forward to your comments and thoughts after listening to this episode. And until next time, stay conscious and stay wise.